Welcome back to Local News Live. I'm Victoria Shirley. It is cold all across the country, but especially here in Omaha, Nebraska, where we've seen some below zero temperatures. I'm going to bring in a WOWT meteorologist, and Clay Osterly is here to join us. Clay, it is so cold that you did an experiment this morning with some water. What was that experiment?
Basically, we've seen this experiment several times when the temperature gets this cold, but you can take a cup of boiling water outside, and it's so cold, the air is so dry, you can throw it up in the air and hardly any drop of water will hit the ground because it instantly vaporizes from the transfer of heat into the air. So it's really cool. Makes a big old cloud of smoke, and literally, depending on how much water you throw up in the air, little to none of it will actually hit the ground. It'll all turn into this big cloud of little water droplets that come up from the temperature differences in the air and the water there. So had a little fun with that. We need some fun when temperatures are as cold as they are.
Definitely. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of exactly how cold it has been in Nebraska, that wasn't the only experiment you did. You also blew some bubbles into the frozen air. And what was that like? What was the difference between blowing a normal bubble in, like, let's say the summer, and the bubbles you blew yesterday?
Well, the big difference was, of course, they froze. They froze midair last night, and we were seeing temperatures anywhere from about 6 below to about 10 below at that time yesterday evening. And so a couple of different things happened that I thought was pretty cool and a little geeky and nerdy at the same time, which was, of course, the bubbles would freeze midair, so they would take off like they normally would, and then they would freeze and they would fall. Some of them would pop, and you could actually see your breath that got trapped inside the bubble, and it would just poof into the air. So that was a lot of fun doing some of those experiments. Again, anything with temperatures as cold as they are to try to add a little bit of entertainment value to them.
Definitely, Clay. And so we hit some record low below zero temperatures today. Talk to us about that. Exactly how cold has it gotten in Omaha, Nebraska? Right.
This morning we dropped to 23 below zero this morning, which shattered the old record for today, set back in 1979. That was 17 below. So we got to 23 below. Omaha also saw wind chills this morning that were colder and equal to 40 below at times. Frostbite, 5 to 10 minutes with exposure like that. And so you got to definitely play that very safely here. Make sure everything's covered up. Don't go outside without a coat like I did earlier. It wasn't a smart move. Luckily, the wind wasn't blowing too bad at that time. But a couple of other stats about the cold this morning here in Omaha. It's the 12th coldest temperature, well, in the top 12, I should say, coldest temperature on record for Omaha. We tied the same temperature a couple of different times. It's happened several times. But it's also the coldest that we have been since February of 1996. So there are plenty of people that are probably watching this stream right now that weren't even born the last time we were this cold. Even some team members of the WOWT weather team that was only 1 year old when we last saw temperatures like this. And so it's been a very long time since we've seen temperatures quite this cold.
All right, and we've seen cold all across the nation. I believe it was 3 degrees this morning in Texas, and that was warmer. Actually, that was colder than it was in Anchorage, Alaska. So a lot of people are seeing temperatures they're not used to. What does it look like on that map behind you? Mm-hmm. Is this all part of the polar vortex, or what exactly is causing these frigid temperatures?
Right. So a couple of stats from this morning. Dallas, Texas officially fell to 2 below this morning, which is not their coldest temperature on record. That's actually 8 below, but that doesn't happen often. In fact, it's been hundreds of years, or about 100 years plus since that has happened last time. But you'll notice here, look at the pinks. All of these pinks are temperatures that are below zero or very close to 0 degrees. And it extends through Oklahoma, a lot of Illinois, into even Arkansas, and still parts of North Texas, seeing those single-digit temperatures right now as we speak. And the question is this the polar vortex? And it's not. It's actually a piece of the polar vortex. So the polar vortex hangs out at the poles. That's why they call it the polar vortex. It doesn't come down this far, but little pieces pieces of energy can break off from it. And when that happens, it normally comes in across the southern Canadian border, right through here. And a lot of the cold that is associated with the polar vortex can spill south. And that's exactly what's happening here. And you can see a trough of this low pressure that is built in across the whole country here. And might I point out how much warmer it is out across the East Coast and the Southeast right now. Florida's still bragging about temperatures in the 70s and 80s, while the rest of us are struggling to even get above zero. Now, I say bragging loosely, of course. I know they're not trying to rub it in our face, but it certainly stings to look at the map and see those color contours on it.
It definitely does. Luckily, my parents are headed to Florida this weekend, so they are going just in time because they live in Pittsburgh, and it's really cold there as well.
Right. Yeah, not quite as cold in Pennsylvania right now as it is across the heartland, but the good news is that we are at our worst right now. So this morning was the worst that it's going to be. We'll see temperatures today here locally, at least in the Omaha metro area, try to get to zero or slightly above. If we can get above zero, we'll probably end our streak of below zero temperatures. We fell below zero Saturday night. We haven't been back above zero since. And so with the noon reading at Omaha Eppley Airfield, we were one below. So we're getting close. But it's going to top 60 hours where we were below 0 degrees or equal to 0 degrees, a little bit over that. So we're approaching that 70-hour mark at this time. But tomorrow we'll get up to the teens. We'll likely top out around 14 or 15. Same thing for Thursday. And then by the end of the week and into the weekend, some 30s. And I can't believe that I'm actually looking forward to just trying to break the freezing mark at the lower 30s.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like a heat wave for us at this point. Looking forward to 30 degrees or 35 degrees this weekend. But, okay, so Omaha's going to warm up a little bit, if you can use the word warm loosely. What about the rest of the country? Is everybody else sort of moving out of this Arctic weather? Yeah,
it's going to improve a lot here over the next day or so. Obviously, this air mass will shift with time to the east, but it's going to be pretty quick moving. And in fact, areas that have snow on the ground right now across North Texas, North Louisiana, and a lot of these areas do have quite a bit of snow on the ground. It's going to take some time to melt that off. It may take 2, 3, 4 days. But I was looking out at some forecast models before I came back and talked with you guys again. And in 7 days, between now and next Tuesday, areas that are right now in the single digits and either side of 0 degrees could very well be in the 70s and 80s by next Tuesday and next Wednesday. So yeah, it's going to take a couple of days to recover, but stay strong. It will get better, and you'll get back to more typical weather that you're used to across the deep south. Yeah,
those people won't have the same problem that we've been having in Nebraska, having those lingering snow mountain piles, because definitely those are no match for 70 to 80 degree weather. Lastly, let's touch on the rolling blackouts people are experiencing. In some states, they're very controlled, and people, especially in Nebraska, can expect those blackouts to be between 30 to 60 minutes long. But in other places like Texas, they're having a hard time catching up with the power grid. I know I have a friend in Austin, Texas, who lost cell service, who lost electricity and water. So they went from hotel to hotel to try to find some refuge, and finally a friend took her in. So they're having a really hard time in Texas. What are some tips? Can you offer any tips about how to conserve energy there?
Yeah, well, in OPPD, which is the power district here in Omaha, they've been sending out some good tips to consider here. So a lot of things that you might not even think about. You can turn your TV off, but little did I even think about, you know, the little red light on your TV when it's plugged in and it lets you know that it's off. Well, that takes power too. And they're saying just simply turning off power strips. If your TV and so a couple of devices are plugged into power strips, that'll cut some power off to it, or just unplugging them altogether. Anything to try to conserve some energy usage will do a lot of good. Turning lights off, of course, not just keeping lights on for the sake of it. And also, I know right now it's the last thing you want to do, but turning your thermostat down even 1 degree can save 1 to 3% of energy usage from your house. So if you turn it down 2 degrees, you can be at 3 to 6%. And that goes for every household. If we turned our thermostats down just a touch, it would save a lot of energy usage. Obviously, with the rolling blackouts, I know I've seen some information where businesses and homes have been falling to temperatures that are in the 50s and 40s and even 30s inside their home, and I get that. Something to consider here, especially across the Deep South, not so much up here because we haven't really seen the impacts from the latest winter storm. It's just been really cold in this area, but down in the South, they just had an ice storm. They just had record snowfall. They haven't seen snowfall like that in a long time. So down in the South, where we still have leaves on trees, we still have, those branches will become weighted down a whole lot easier with the leaves on the trees and stuff like that. So we not only have power outages from the rolling blackouts, but we also have power outages from storm damage, ice weighing down those power lines, tree branches falling, things like that. So there's a reason that Texas and Louisiana and areas that just dealt with a severe ice storm are seeing the extent of the power outages that they are. It's a little bit more involved than just the coordinated power outages that we're seeing from the power districts right now.
Awesome. Well, Clay, is there anything you have to add to the people that are, across the country that are sitting in this really cold weather and hopefully staying warm?
Guys, I would say we're all in this together right now. There are so many of us that are dealing with this extreme cold that we're not used to. Even here in the Midwest and in the Northern Plains, this is not typical cold, and so you have to realize that. But we're all in this together, and the good news is the worst of it is right now, and we will get a lot better here over the next coming days here. But just bundle up, layer up, make sure you are staying inside as much as possible. And then also too, I know that desperation can set in sometimes, but please don't run cars in garages, don't run generators inside, and don't burn anything inside, because all of those create carbon monoxide. You can't smell it, you can't detect it unless you have a detector. And guys, we have already seen fatalities from carbon monoxide poisoning as a result of people trying to stay warm. So don't do those things. It's not worth the risk. Just layer up the best you can and try to stay warm.
All right, so basically in a nutshell, we just need to hang in there. Everyone in those colder areas, except for Florida.
Right.
Just keep enjoying
head
that
on down
sun,
to Florida.
Or head on down to Florida with your masks. Actually, don't travel. Stay where you are and stay warm. All right, thank you so much, WOWT meteorologist Clay Osterly. Thank you so much for joining us here at LNL. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.